ready to go. So thank you, Rich, for inviting me, and thank you for spending a little time with me. My name is Evan Weiner. I have been a journalist since 1971, and I started up in Rockland County, New York. I was in 11th grade at Spring Valley High School in Rockland County, and I had a teacher named Joe Dionisio, who 50 years later I still talk to. And he said, "Student, you have a good voice. How would you like to be in radio?" And I said, "In the worst way." And I was. On WRKL radio, we did the local high school show. I ended up at the age of 21 being on WNEW radio, 50,000 watts in New York, William B. Williams and those people. And among the assignments I had there, interviewing Ronald Reagan, candidate Ronald Reagan, one-on-one, 1980. And the return of the U.S. hostages from Iran. Over the years, I switched over to sports, got to know this guy a little bit, Yogi Berra, baseball in the American culture, and certainly in the 1950s and the 1960s and the 1970s and the 1980s and the 1990s into the 21st century. Yogi Berra was a central part of baseball in the American culture. You couldn't miss him playing baseball through 1965 or some of the commercials that he did or the guest spots that he did, including the Sergeant Bilko show and What's My Line in the 1950s. Yogi seemed to be all over the place. And back in 1954, the French philosopher Jacques Barzun noted in a series of essays, one of his essays, which you might have in the library, Barzun, whoever wants to know the heart and mind of America had better learn baseball and do it on a low level, a high school level, watching kids on the sandlot, or the minor league level, where you see Americans interact with one another on the baseball field. And of course, Barzun is writing this while the New York Yankees, New York Giants, Brooklyn Dodgers are winning all the pennants in the National League and the American League, and a New York team was in the World Series every year in the 1950s, with the exception of 1959, and even that could be debated because it was the Los Angeles Dodgers who had moved from Brooklyn 2 years earlier. Now, back in fourth grade, in either 1964 or 1965, I had a teacher by the name of Miss Alexander. And Miss Alexander had the requisite blue hair because she was like 142 years old, PS 151, Woodside, Queens. So she had the requisite blue hair and the white blouse and the short blue skirt. And she had the napkin up here in case her nose ran. She'd just go like that, like that. And she gave me an assignment, not only me, but everybody else in the class. And I was 8 going on 9. I was a year ahead, so everybody else is 9 going on 10. And the assignment was simple. Analyze the poem, Casey at the Bat. Well, Casey at the Bat, you know, we're supposed to write a little paragraph about what we thought of Casey at the Bat. And I said, he's a lousy baseball player. Struck out when his team needed him. Could have won the game. He just struck out. He's a lousy baseball player. And Miss Alexander said, "Oh, no, you got it all wrong." For the record, she was about 64 years old. Anyway, you got it all wrong. No, it's about man. Put into the right position to succeed. It's about man's failures. And like I said, he's a lousy player. Struck out with the bases loaded. But Casey at the Bat, I'm not sure is assigned to school kids anymore. I know there's one school district in New Jersey, up in Union or Essex County, where a woman who came to one of my talks, either at the Westfield Library or the Springfield Library, I forgot which one, who said that she is a music teacher, does plays, and every spring her kids have to do a rendition of Casey at the Bat. It's the only one I've heard lately, but it used to be big when I was a kid, but that was a long time ago. Ernest Thayer and I have something in common. We both wrote for the San Francisco Examiner, him between 1886 and 1888, and me in the 21st century in the year 2000. Different papers by this point. But he writes Casey at the Bat, doesn't take any credit for it. It's printed without author's credit. although there was a byline Finn, which was his nickname. Thayer didn't talk much about the poem. I'm not sure if the poem was just a throwaway. It might have been just a throwaway, just filling a column, or if he was serious about it. We don't know who Casey was. Could have been King Kong Kelly. He played in New England when Thayer was going to Harvard. He was a big baseball star back in the early 1880s. Could have been somebody from Stockton, California. They claim that they had a Casey type guy. In fact, the Stockton minor league baseball team is nicknamed the Mudville Nine. There's no joy in Mudville, for the mighty Casey struck out. Also, maybe it was Dave Casey. He played with Baltimore in the 1880s, but we don't know. Thayer never said who it was. Could have been somebody else completely. Thayer didn't take any author's credit, but when there was a reunion in Harvard in 1895, he read the poem there from beginning to the end. But by 1895, this poem is very famous around the United States, partially because of this guy, DeWolf Hopper. For those of you who are of a certain age, you might remember his daughter, Heather Hopper, who was a gossip columnist in the 1950s and 1960s, and also appeared on television shows in the 1960s as a guest or a panelist talking about something that filled up television time. But anyway, her father, DeWolf Hopper, somehow gets a hold of this poem that's printed in the newspaper, and he says, you know, this is pretty good. This is really, really good. I think I could do something with it. And I don't know when he gets the poem. San Francisco Examiner was a very small newspaper. San Francisco was an outpost. It was actually an eastern city type outpost out in the Pacific Ocean, where it's cold in the winter, in the summer, and the winter is warm. Anyway, so he gets a copy of this, and this was syndicated around the country, so it might not have come from the San Francisco Examiner. And he puts together an act, August 14th, 1888. It's a vaudeville act that DeWolf Hopper performs for the first time. Be the first of about 10,000 performances on the vaudeville stage, on record, on film. His career lasted into the 1920s when he put it on film. So it became part of the culture, and people went to see DeWolf Hopper perform this on the vaudeville stage or whatever other stage he performed it on. But if you were going to take it into your home in the 1890s, you'd be able to. That is the Springfield, New Jersey Library, and that is an old disc machine that you kind of crank it up, and you see at 3 o'clock on the on what would be the dial. You crank it up, you spin the disc, and it makes noise. And this is at Springfield, New Jersey Library. There was a guy in town who was a hermit who passed away, and he had all this stuff in his house that could have been valuable, and left no heirs, no next to kin. And so somebody suggested, there's a big room at the library. That's where I speak when the library is open, doing that type of thing. And Debbie, who is the librarian, the head of the library, said, hey, you want to hear this? I said, sure. And it's some sort of Sousa tune that's on there, some sort of march, but it works. You had one of those in your home, or Regina Sublina, you too could listen to Casey at the Bat, because this guy, Russell Hunting, was recorded it. Russell Hunting was an entertainer, and he played around with sound. He was an early sound recordist, one of the first in the nation. And he records it first in 1893. And then again in 1898, both times he used a heavy Irish brogue because presumably Casey was Irish. In 1905, John Kaiser recorded it for Thomas Edison at the Menlo Park Laboratories. Hopper would record it for Victor before it became RCA Victor with Nipper the dog and his master's voice and all that other stuff. His didn't come out till 1906. But in 1905, 1906, if you had one of those, you could listen to it in your home. This is up in Chicoutimi, Quebec. I speak on cruise ships, and we stopped in, officially it's Sagway, but Chicoutimi, New York, Quebec. This is October of 2019. And I was just walking through the town, And there that thing stared me right in the face, because some guy, his garage, this was his garage. Instead of a car, he had all this old stuff. And there's Edison phonographs behind this old gramophone or phonograph. So I said, hey, for my baseball talk, this would be great, because you could throw that record that Kaiser made or that Hopper made, throw it right there, crank it up, and you could play it. And that's the way you could find out about Casey at the Bat at your home. If you didn't want to go down to the theater, or if you didn't want to read it in a book or a newspaper, you had that to listen to. Hopper would be the first to commit the verse to film, early short subject. Made by Lee DeForest in 1922. Wallace Beery starred in the 1927 version in the silent movies. The comic, Jerry Colonna, who was Bob Hope's sidekick back in the 30s and 40s, he had that big bushy mustache, recorded a rendition for Disney, which later provided the basis for a 1946 Disney cartoon called Casey at the Bat. Jackie Gleason performed it on his television show in the 1950s. Johnny Bench and Tug McGraw and others voiced the poem, often in orchestral settings. Now, if you were on the New York City subway back in 1908, and you happen to be sitting with this song guy and entertainer on the vaudeville stage, Jack Norworth, you might have talked to him, although people on the subway don't talk to one another. And Norworth is on the subway, and he sees this sign, ball game today at the Polo Grounds. And he's thinking, and he's thinking, and he's thinking, well, let's see, what can I do with this? So he goes back to his office, or an office. He runs into a guy who writes music by the name of Albert von Tilzer. And he says, I got this idea for a song. What do you think? And so Norworth and von Tilzer put it together. And this guy, well, he didn't make it famous. It was famous before he did it. But this is Harry Carey. I worked with Harry Carey in the winter of 1994 on the syndicated baseball show, which was launched, unfortunately, during the middle of the 1994 baseball strike, so it didn't have a chance. Anyway, this is Harry Carey. What you don't see here is 6 of his best friends named Bud, as in Budweiser. And he would sing the song between the top of the 7th inning and the bottom of the 7th inning at Wrigley Field. And he would sing it rather badly, extremely badly, but he got his point across. And Harry passed away, but the tradition lives on in Chicago in Wrigley Field. Somebody, a celebrity, comes in and sings this particular song in between the top of the 7th inning and the bottom of the 7th inning. And there's only one thing that they have to remember when singing the song. They have to sing it badly, like Harry did. The song is called Take Me Out to the Ball Game, and it's about a woman by the name of Katie Casey. I don't know if she was related to Casey at the Bat, but it's Katie Casey. Katie Casey is a young woman, maybe 20, 21, 22 years old, and she's got the baseball bug, and she's got it badly. She's going out with somebody. Baseball games used to start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't know if this is a weekday or a weekend. If she's on the subway, and presumably she is on the subway. If she is on the subway, she's going with her boyfriend somewhere. I don't know where. And they start talking back and forth. But you got to remember, Katie Casey's a big baseball fan. And the boyfriend, this husband, maybe a brother, maybe a father, or just a friend. Yeah, they're talking back and forth. What are we supposed to do here this afternoon? And the boyfriend says, let's go to a show. Show? I don't want to go to a show. I don't want to go to a show at all. I'll tell you what you could do, though. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I ever get back, for we will root for the home team. They don't win. It's a shame, for it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Now, Norworth never saw a baseball game. Von Tilzer never saw a baseball game, so nor with either reading about it. Well, the only thing he could do is read about the game if he was never out there. There's no radio, no TV. There was film around, but not really all that much film. Anyway, so if you look at it realistically, in terms of Norwith, he's making this all up. But why did he make it all up? Apparently, he had a former girlfriend who was a woman suffragette. It's been argued in the Washington Post in an op-ed piece in 2019 that Take Me Out to the Ball Game is the first women's lib song of all time, because you have this young woman who is the star of, well, she is the most important person in this poem or in the lyrics that become a song, Katie Casey. And not only, well, in 1908, when the song was written, it was not a cool thing for a girl or a woman to go to a baseball game. It's uncouth. Baseball players were ruffians. They were not considered, you know, highbrow people. They were considered the lowest of the low playing baseball and often acted that way. But anyway, to make a long story short, was it the first women's lib song? Here it is. It's about Katie Casey. And not only Katie gets out there and wants to go to the ball game, but when she's at the ball game, she doesn't have any problem screaming at an umpire if he did her team wrong. She will yell and scream that that was a bad call. And the other thing is, she knew all the players. The players didn't have any numbers. The players didn't have any names on their back, but she knew all the players and she knew how to get them aroused. And then she would break into Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Norwith would see his first baseball game in 1928, Von Tilzer in 1940. The song written in 1908, the song would become famous on the vaudeville stage because of Norwith's wife, Nora Bayes, who would sing it on the vaudeville stage. And she also would sing another song that went along with it, Shine On Harvest Moon. And of course, Shine On Harvest Moon was a famous song for a long time, except its shelf life is a lot less than Take Me Out to the Ball Game, which is still going strong 113 years later. Probably Sirius XM radio somewhere along the line you could hear Shine On Harvest Moon. But baseball doesn't embrace the song, doesn't embrace the song at all. It wouldn't be until 1934 that it would be played at a baseball game. The 1934 World Series, the St. Louis Cardinals playing the Detroit Tigers in Detroit, and a band broke into Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Of course, today, Take Me Out to the Ball Game is played virtually every day during the baseball season somewhere, and probably more than just somewhere. It's played all around the place. Take Me Out to the Ball Game would have different life away from baseball. Groucho Marx, Night at the Opera. He's working for Mrs. Teasdale. He goes to Italy with Mrs. Teasdale to find the world's greatest tenor, but instead he finds Harpo and Chico, and they have a friend who's a great tenor, and Groucho thinks, well, this is the guy, not Margaret Dumont's character, should come back to New York and sing. Well, they get him back to New York. You might have Night at the Opera, the DVD, at your library. They get him back to the New York, and the other tenor is there because they were stowaways. I'm not going to give away too much more of the plot, but they have to knock out the tenor Mrs. Teasdale wants. They do, and they have to kill some time. And Harpo and Chico jump into the orchestra pit, hand out all kind of sheet music, and the sheet music is Take Me Out to the Ball Game. And here's Groucho, who comes down from the opera box and starts selling peanuts and Cracker Jacks. Harpo Marx would return to the song on I Love Lucy in 1955. It has been played in numerous movies, TV shows, radio, and in this day, it's probably been downloaded a whole bunch of times on your iPhone. Or your other recording devices, Spotify, whatever. Take Me Out to the Ball Game, and it still endures 113 years later. That is Bud Abbott on the left. That is Paterson, New Jersey native Lou Costello on the right. Who's on first? What's on second? Comedians have told me this was a a routine called rounders, very popular in the vaudeville days, very popular on the burlesque circuit. And basically, this is what it is. You have the idiot, the pinhead, Costello, and you had the smart aleck, Bud Abbott here. And basically, this thing is Lou Costello is a big baseball fan, and he wants to know who the players are on the St. Louis Wolves. Baseball. This routine was called rounders by some. Baseball comes out of a game called rounders. I speak up at the Berkshires every year when there's not COVID around. And up in North Adams, Massachusetts, there's an old factory that's been converted into an art museum. And across the street from the art museum is the Berkshire Baseball Museum, which is a little more than a storefront. That honors Jack Chesborough, who's a Hall of Fame pitcher, won 41 games with the New York Highlanders in 1904, and Jeff Reardon, who played with Montreal and the Mets in the 1980s, 70s, and 1980s. Who's from both of those guys are from that area, Pittsfield, and other Pittsfield players. So anyway, in that storefront, there's a cutout in the store, and it talks about how the first baseball game, or baseball, B-A-S, capital B-A-S-E, capital B-A-L-L, baseball, how baseball was played in Pittsfield back in around 1792. It came out of a game called rounders. The Mills Commission tried to find who started baseball back at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. And they found a guy by the name of Abner Graves in Denver, who was a drunk and allegedly killed his wife, who said that he saw Abner Doubleday invent baseball in 1839 in Cooperstown, New York, which is a myth. But I always found it strange that baseball came out of a game called rounders, and its most famous comedy routine was also named rounders. Anyway, in this particular instance, Costello, the pinhead, the idiot, is asking Abbott, who is the captain or manager of the St. Louis Wolves, all about his lineup. And he says, I love baseball, this other stuff. Who's on first? And Abbott would say, who? Well, that's who I'm asking. Who? Who's on first? And they go round and round and round and round and round. And it could last a minute, could last 10 minutes, depending where they were performing, etc. It is an American classic comedy routine, a common vaudeville burlesque style. Question, did Abbott and Costello pay Michael Musto $15 for the routine? Not known. Comedians used to steal all the time back in those days. Musto might have stolen it. He may not have written it. Some people think that Musto actually wrote it. But guys borrowed heavily back in those days. They went around the country. There was no radio. Well, there was radio by that point. But it didn't really matter. If you did it the best, you claimed it for yourself. So did they pay $15? Unknown. One of my friends, John Joseph, who's a comedian singer, says, of course they paid them. Or Musto. And Max Docelli, who's another one of my friends who is a cruise ship comedian, said, come on, we're comics. We steal all the time. Baseball burlesque routine, maybe. Maybe Abbott did a version of the routine before meeting Costello on the burlesque circuit. But in 1936, they get a hold of this routine. By 1938, they're on the Kate Smith CBS radio show, which was immensely popular. They may have gotten some help from Costello's writer, John Grant, and Will Glickman, who lasted into the 1960s doing an episode of Car 54 as a comedy writer. And they go on the Kate Smith show. They unleash this routine on the nation 83 years ago. And the rest is history. They performed at the White House. They performed in the movies, on radio, on TV. Abbott and Costello in 1956 were enshrined in baseball's Hall of Fame. The Los Angeles Dodgers announcer Vin Scully, about 15 years ago, is doing his TV and radio simulcast, which he did the first 2 innings of every game. And he looks up one day and he sees this image on his screen. And he says, now we know the answer to the eternal baseball question of who's on first. Who's on first? Who was a South Korean player who came over to North America, made it to the Dodgers, and he is standing on first base. There was a what? One on second. He played for Washington in the 1920s before this routine became famous. But I do know this, there has never been a shortstop by the name of, I don't give a darn. Franklin Roosevelt. I went up to the Franklin Roosevelt Presidential Museum in Hyde Park, New York in September 2017. I do a whole bunch of talks, one on the 1936 Olympics, one on the early days of TV, and of course the baseball talk, just three of them that I needed Roosevelt's input. And I wanted to know, why did you allow the American Olympic team to go to Berlin during the Hitler Olympics in 1936? He felt it was good for the athletes to go, seconded by an old friend of mine who I used to work with, Marty Glickman, who did not run in the 1936 Olympics, was benched probably by Avery Brundage. But anyway, Marty told me that he wanted to go to show the Hitler that a Jew could win a race, and it would be the 4x100 relay, and then he was going to stick that medal right in the Fuhrer's face. And Roosevelt felt the same way. In 1939, he was the first person in the United States ever to be on commercial TV, Channel 1 in New York, greeting people at the 1939 World's Fair on April 30th of that year in New York. And also the green light letter. What is the green light letter? Well, baseball is thoroughly ingrained in the American culture by this point. That is Kennesaw Mountain Landis. He was the baseball commissioner, and he had questions for Roosevelt after the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Should we play? I mean, we cut the season short in 1918 because of World War I, not because of the Spanish flu. You tell us what to do, because we don't know what to do. Well, it's called the green light letter. And the letter was sent to Landis, and this is what Roosevelt said. I honestly feel that it would be best for the country to keep baseball going. Baseball provides a recreation which does not last over 2 hours or 2.5. Roosevelt obviously, well, he died in 1945, so he didn't see any Red Sox-Yankees games over the last 15 years that go 4.5 hours, and which can be got for very little cost. And incidentally, I hope that night games can be extended, because it gives an opportunity to the day shift to see a game occasionally. What Roosevelt wanted to do was to make sure that people had some recreation, had a way to get away from the war for a couple of hours here and there. And he thought it was important for the morale of the country that baseball was played. And I spoke to the late Dan Rooney a number of years ago, the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he said with that letter that the NFL, the National Football League, continued to play, and the other sports played as well. Baseball at the movies. So like Yogi at the movies, there was a segment called Yogi at the Movies where Yogi Berra in the 1990s actually critiqued movies for some sports, regional sports networks. So Yogi. Anyway, Babe Ruth was in 10 movies. 1920s silent film, Heading Home, starred Babe as a baseball player, typecasting. And then Babe Comes Home, 1927 silent movie. No print has survived. You had to really take care of those prints to survive, or they disintegrate. This one did survive. Speedy, Harold Lloyd's silent movie, 1928. And Ruth is playing himself, and he's signing autographs for a bunch of kids, and he has to get to Yankee Stadium because there's a game. And he spots a cab. Harold Lloyd is the cab driver, and mayhem and hilarity prevail after that as Babe gets into the cab and Lloyd is the cab driver. Overall, Ruth was in 10 movies, but he wasn't the first star from the baseball world to get onto or get into the movies. That'd be Mike Donlon, who was with the New York Giants. He was the baseball idol of Manhattan. He's a pretty good player. He hit .333, but he could make more money performing on stage or in vaudeville, so why hang around the game? especially if they'll take me back, which they did. He retired for good in 1914, went right into the movies, and he starred in a movie called Right Off the Bat, which featured his New York Giants manager, John McGraw. And chances are, some of those movies, he was supposed to be in 53 movies, or allegedly was in 53 movies, some of which survived, some of which probably didn't. Anyway, it was a good chance that those films were shot adjacent to what is now the parking lot of the library up in Fort Lee, right off the George Washington Bridge, because that is where the American film industry was in the 19-teens. And you go in the parking lot at the Fort Lee Library and you'll see these signs talking about how Fort Lee was the film capital of the world in the 19-teens. That's not Gary Cooper, that is Lou Gehrig. And Lou Gehrig is in a movie called Rawhide in 1938. It's rather stupid. Lou Gehrig is with the New York Yankees, and he's retiring, he's had enough, he can't play anymore, and he's going with his sister to Montana, where he's going to spend the rest of his life in solitude. It's rather stupid. The whole premise is stupid. Gehrig went to grade school in New York, Columbia University, went to play with the New York Yankees, lived in New Rochelle over here on the Lou Gehrig Way, and was married to Ellie. But anyway, this was Gehrig's persona in this movie. The movie was not very good, except for one thing. Lou Gehrig is diagnosed with ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, in 1939. And the movie provides the doctors kind of a baseline to see where Gehrig was in terms of moving his arms, his legs, his head, whatever, in 1938, because they diagnosed him in 1939. So it gives them an 18-month window on how quickly the disease progressed. Gehrig, that was his contribution to medical research, and Babe Ruth had a contribution to research as well, because he had chemotherapy, and that was because he had throat cancer. He was one of the first people in the United States ever to get chemotherapy. It made him a little better in 1947, 48, and then he went the other way, dying from the throat cancer. So that's kind of unique in that Ruth and Gehrig are remembered as these great, great baseball players, but their contributions to society may have been greater through medicine. The Rawhide. The film opens with Gehrig announcing his retirement at Grand Central Terminal. He hops on that iron train, or the Iron Horse, which was his nickname. He's out in Montana. He's going to spend the rest of his life in solitude. My hero, Bugs Bunny, who taught me most everything I learned in life, Warner Brothers cartoons. Absolute heckler. There he is with his bottle of carrot juice and popcorn and an eaten carrot. He's out in right field in a hole, and he's heckling the Gas House Gorillas. Take off on the Gas House Gang, the St. Louis Cardinals 1934 baseball team. And he's yelling, "I'll murder the bums. I'll kill you. I'll kill you with one arm tied behind my back." Well, the Gas House Gorillas take his offer. Bugs replaces the teetotalers, and Bugs would win the game. League of Their Own, the movie. There is Madonna jumping into the arms of Rosie O'Donnell, and Gina Davis with the chest protector back there smiling. About the girls' professional baseball league that lasted from about 1943 to 1954. Based on the true story and based on the DVD that came out the year before, and Casey Kendall was telling me about that. He's now a coach with the Seattle Mariners, but this is going back 25 years when he was with the Montreal Expos, because he was the technical advisor on the film because his mother played in the league. There's Gary Cooper as Lou Gehrig in the Lou Gehrig story. You know, I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth speech that Gehrig gave on July 4th, 1939, when the Yankees honored him, was forgotten, but was revived because of this movie. And it became probably the most famous baseball speech ever, thanks to Gary Cooper. Bull Durham, the love triangle here, Tim Robbins' character, Kevin Costner's character, and Susan Sarandon's character. It's about baseball and this veteran catcher, not good enough for the major leagues, trying to make sure that the pitcher, Tim Robbins, gets through the season and doesn't wreck his arm because he's got $1 million arm and a 10-cent head, and you got the love story in there. There is Jerry Lewis and the Geisha Boy. When the Dodgers moved from Brooklyn to Los Angeles, Dodger players became stars on TV and sometimes in the movies. And here Jerry Lewis is talking to Pee Wee Reese about what he wants done in the Geisha Boy. Robert Redford, The Natural, the book, the movie, you might have that in the library. Kevin Costner talking to shoeless Joe Jackson in the movie Field of Dreams in the Iowa cornfield. The Yankees and White Sox were supposed to play last year in an Iowa cornfield. That didn't happen because of COVID-19. Baseball is trying to do that again this year. There is Brad Pitt as Billy Bean in Moneyball. You might have the book by Michael Lewis or the movie in the library. Billy Bean, analytics in baseball, and Billy Bean is the smartest guy in baseball. All you have to do is ask him. But there he is, Billy Bean. Brad Pitt playing him. Walter Matthau as the coach of the Bad News Bears, sponsored by the Chico Bell Bonds. This is not Matthau's first brush with baseball in a movie. Matthau and Jack Lemmon would have another brush with it a little later on after this movie. Major League, Charlie Sheen was in both Major League 1 and Major League 2. And there I am in Pittsburgh, leaning against the wall at Forbes Field in Pittsburgh. And the reason why, Bing Crosby was one of the owners of the Pittsburgh Pirates, about 25% share starting in 1946 till his death in 1977. And Bob Hope invested in the Cleveland Indians also in 1946. Bill Veeck sold a small chunk of the Indians to Bob Hope. Hope was a native of Cleveland. He was born in England. He was a fan of the team, and he jumped at the chance to own a small share of his team. Pride of the Yankees, Bull Durham, Major League, Angels in the Outfield, Fields of Dreams, The Geisha Boy, Bad News Bears, The Natural, and Moneyball. Some of the movies, there were a lot of movies. Those are just some of the movies that featured baseball. This is a Pulitzer Prize winning picture, one of the few Pulitzer Prizes ever given out to sports in newspapers. My friend, the late Dave Anderson, won a Pulitzer for his writing in the New York Times. And a guy who I met in 1979 by the name of Nat Fine won his Pulitzer in 1948, Babe Ruth's last time standing for the national anthem. I got to talk to Nat in 1979. He was with the New York Journal-American until the paper's demise in 1965 when it merged with two other newspapers in New York. And he was running kind of a photo shop in Piermont, New York, and also working part-time for Orange and Rockland Utilities. And I'm 23. And I was asking him about this. When you get an opportunity like this, it's usually a matter of luck, not because I've had 4 scoops in my life, and none of them I ever prepared for. I just stumbled into them. Nat seemed to have done the same thing. Nat was a photographer, and he's with the other photographers. You can see the photographers down on the first baseline. The Yankees clubhouse and dugout was on the third base side in 1948. And everybody's inside. They're taking pictures of Babe getting dressed. And Babe is in really tough shape at this point from the throat cancer. And pretty much it is understood this is the last time he's going to be on the baseball field. And so everybody scoots up. But Nat decides to stay back for a minute and just watch Babe following him up the steps. And then he would take his spot on the right field line. But the national anthem started to play. And Nat's still in the dugout. Takes this picture, voila, it's a great picture. Right place at the right time. and he wins a Pulitzer Prize, Babe Ruth's Last Stand. Homer Simpson is in baseball's Hall of Fame. The 1992 Springfield Nuclear Power Plant wins the city championship, and they beat a bunch of guys who are major league players. There's Sandy Koufax, Mr. Ed, and Wilbur Allen Post. Mr. Ed, Sandy Koufax, I think signing an autograph for Wilbur Post. Sandy was on the Mr. Ed show. Television, Leo DeRocher, the third base coach of the Los Angeles Dodgers, signs Herman Munster to a contract, and Herman gets on the field, injures a bunch of players. He's 7'4", 7'6", weighs 540 pounds. Just ruins some players, and the Dodgers have to get rid of him. That is Gilligan, and to his right, your left, is Jim Lefevre of the Los Angeles Dodgers, who's ready to season Gilligan. To his right is Al Ferrara, who once said that he knew he made it in the major leagues when he had one of these, a baseball card. I knew Jim when he was the manager of the Seattle Mariners, and I asked him about that. This is around 1997. I said, what were you doing on Gilligan's Island? And he says, well, we were headhunters. We wanted to shrink Gilligan's head and eat him. I said, so many people passed through there. How come nobody ever told anybody of the 7 stranded castaways? And he said, and why? Ruin the show? Johnny Roseborough. This looks like it's from Dragnet. It is from Dragnet. Walter O'Malley appeared with the Rifleman star and the one-time Brooklyn Dodgers first baseman Chuck Connors. He was the owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers and the Los Angeles Dodgers in the show called Branded on NBC in 1965. Willie Davis, the Dodgers center fielder, acted in The Love Machine. Jerry Lewis's Which Way to the Front and The Flying Nun with Sally Field. Johnny Roseborough, Dragnet 1968, just the facts, man. Burke's Law, Kraft Suspense Theater, Mr. Ed, and Experiment in Terror. When I'm live, I usually ask the crowd, who's the guy on the right? And now, who's the guy on the left? Because this is so long ago. The guy on the left is Phil Silvers of the You'll Never Get Rich, Phil Silvers' Bilko show, depending on syndication and all that. The guy on the right, Steve Bilko. He was a great player with the Los Angeles Angels of the Pacific Coast League. And Nat Hiken, who put together the Bilko show and Car 54, Where Are You?, fell in love with Steve Bilko so much that he named the title character of the Bilko show after Steve Bilko. Donna Reed, Brady Bunch, Mr. Ed, The Munsters, Phil Silvers show, also known as Bilko, some of the shows that you might see players on, which brings me to Yogi. And I said to Yogi one day, because I spoke at his museum, I said, hey, you were on the Phil Silvers show, right? He said, yeah, I was. I said, and that was done in Kansas, wasn't it? I said, and he said, no, it's done in the Bronx. What do you mean done in the Bronx? He said, it was done in the Bronx. I said, but what were the Yankees doing in Kansas? He said, no, we weren't in Kansas. We were, I was home. I drove over the George Washington Bridge up to the Cross Bronx Expressway. And then I went over to the studio in the Bronx. And I knew right then and there, it was not going to go all that well with me trying to convince Yogi he was in Kansas. But the Yankee players were in Kansas. That's Moose Stubing. Moose Stubing is was the manager of the Anaheim Angels in the mid 1980s to late 1980s, and this is Captain Stubing of the Love Boat, and Moose Stubing's. Well, let's let Moose tell the story. Apparently, Aaron Spelling, the king of schlock on TV, he produced Starsky and Hutch. He produced Charlie's Angels. He produced Dynasty and The Pain, Fantasy Island, and The Love Boat. Used to use the Baseball Encyclopedia to name his TV characters. And Moose Stubing, he looked at the name and said, hey, that's it, Moose Stubing, he's going to be the guy who's going to be the captain of the Love Boat. And he was. On one of those shows, Charlie's Angels, on Charlie's Angels, Spelling used John Forsythe as his off-camera announcer. And Forsythe started his career, first paying job at the ballpark, as an announcer at Ebbets Field for the Brooklyn Dodgers in the 1950s. He would go on to star in one of Spelling's biggest hits, Dynasty, in the 1980s. And there is John Forsythe and Jack Lemmon. Forsythe going full circle, being part of the Hollywood All-Stars, raising money. And there's Jack Lemmon. Lemmon was in The Odd Couple in 1968 with Walter Matthau, and there's a scene in The Odd Couple with Lemmon as Felix Unger, and he calls up, I was going to say Jack Klugman, he calls up Oscar, and he's looking at Oscar in terms of what are we going to do for dinner? So he calls him at Shea Stadium, and I could tell you exactly where that was. It was right next to the official scorer's box, and there's a pole. And the phone was on the pole, so you had to go back this way to talk, because the noise would come back that way. And as he's watching it, or talking to Lemmon, he's not watching the game, he's watching the wall. And Bill Mazeroski of the Pittsburgh Pirates hits into a triple play, scripted into the triple play. And Felix wants to know, what do you want for dinner? And Oscar is going to kill him because he missed the best play of the year for the New York Mets. And, you know, that's The Odd Couple. That's Bob Uecker. Bob Uecker, the Milwaukee Braves catcher, the Atlanta Braves catcher, the Philadelphia Phillies catcher, the St. Louis Cardinals catcher. And he's on the Carson show. Al Hurt found him down in the South. He was working on a stand-up routine. And Hurt calls up Carson and he says, you got to get this guy on. He's the funniest guy I've seen. And Carson says, yeah, we get him on, Bob Uecker. And Bob Uecker kills, absolutely kills. Okay, so he kills, and Carson invites him to the chair. And if you're a comedian, there is no higher compliment than being invited to the chair. And they became buddies over the years. And Carson didn't know he was a baseball player the first time out. And Carson leans over to him and he says, is it true that you're a baseball player? And Uecker says, I have one of these. It must be. It's a baseball player, Mr. Baseball. Broadway, whatever Lola wants, Lola gets. Damn Yankees. Written at the time the Yankees had won 5 straight World Series. And Joe Hardy, the Washington player, sells his soul to the devil so that the Washington team can win. And the other big song there is You Gotta Have Heart. You know, whatever Lola wants, Lola gets, and you gotta have heart. And there's Ed Sullivan, 1969. The New York Mets, the amazing Mets, win the World Series. And most of the Mets are there. Gil Hodges is into the manager. And Sullivan must have been really happy because he started out life as a sports writer with the New York Daily News. And you don't know this, but my cousin, Jerry Stiller, and his wife, Ann Mirror, were on the show about 36 times. I do a TV talk where I get into a lot of what Jerry told me about Ed Sullivan, which, oh, there's cousin Jerry, with my kids a long time ago. And it must mean if Jerry's here that I have a story or two. Yeah, I do. Jerry Seinfeld. Now, you might remember that Jerry Stiller played George Costanza's father, Frank Costanza, on the show. And you might remember George Steinbrenner was a central part of the show as well. So much so that he suggested storylines, including Missing George, Board Meeting Moved, and different uniforms. He just sent it into Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm. And 22 minutes later, scripts are done. Missing George is a true story about George Steinbrenner in Tampa. He had a guy who worked for him in Tampa that was kind of a shady character. He thought had shady friends. He worried about him then. He was going to cross paths with a shady guy. So it's a Friday afternoon. George leaves the office and it says goodbye to everybody. Everybody says goodbye to him. Comes back on Monday morning. 5 in the morning was when George got there, and he looks around and this guy's car is there, and George says, something happened, I know something happened. He calls the Tampa police, all points bulletin sent out, looking for this guy because George thinks he's dead. Um, the guy walks in later in the afternoon. It's turned into a story. And it involves my cousin Jerry. George Costanza in the show is the assistant traveling secretary for the New York Yankees. And George thinks he thinks he may be hanging out with the wrong crowd. But anyway, George leaves and comes back Monday morning, and George Costanza's car is there. And George, something happened. George is dead. And they go to Frank Costanza's house to tell him George is dead. My cousin Frank and my cousin Jerry. Jerry's like, and he's, wait, you traded Jay Buhner for Ken Phelps? Great line in the show, because Jay Buhner went on to a really good career with the Seattle Mariners, and Ken Phelps washed out with the Yankees. Make a long story short, George turns up. Board meeting moved. Well, there was a meeting at Yankee Stadium. Somebody brought in some food, and if you knew George, your food was his food. I smell food, and he moved the board meeting to a restaurant around Yankee Stadium, and different uniforms, different kind of material was used for the Tampa Yankees in the Florida State League back during the George days, and they made that into a show. George was actually on the show, but they never used him. Here he is, was seen with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and it never made it. Seinfeld said he actually did the scene in the show, and it was terrible. We couldn't use him. We cut him out. He wasn't funny. I don't remember exactly what went wrong with it, but it was quite an awkward situation. George Costanza is upset because he thinks Keith Hernandez, the former Mets first baseman, is cutting into his friendship with Jerry, and they do a whole show on that. Hernandez said that his agent, Scott Boras, said, "You want to be on Seinfeld?" He said, "What's that?" Jerry's a big Mets fan. He says, "Well, we'll fly you out first class, have you in a nice hotel for a week. Oh, you get 15 grand. Keith said, "Okay, I'm ready to go." This Seinfeld guy, I know him. He's a good guy. Actually, they're friends now. George Steinbrenner hosted Saturday Night Live. One skit, he plays all the positions. He's the manager, he's coach, general manager, and owner. Wasn't too far from the truth. George thought he could do all of that. Baseball been very, very good to me. Chico Escuela, the Garrett Morris character from the early days of Saturday Night Live. And there was actually in St. Petersburg, before a Yankees-Mets preseason game, a Chico Escuela night that was shown on Saturday Night Live. That's Wally Pitt, the first baseman before Lou Gehrig, took over on June 2nd, 1925. I was going to take him out of this talk, except I watched Jeopardy! Season 37, Episode 1, September of 2020, and Wally Pitt was an answer to a question. He took Wally Pipp's spot as the Yankee regular first baseman. And when I grew up, I always heard about, don't get Wally Pipp, don't get Wally Pipp. I think I'm going to drop this. You know, after all, it happened in 1925. It's 96 years ago. Who cares? Obviously, the producers and writers at Jeopardy cared. And yeah, the truth is, Lou Gehrig did take Wally Pipp's job because Wally Pipp had a headache. He was beamed a few days earlier, but probably had more to do with Gehrig being a super prospect, and let's get him into the lineup quickly. And that was the end of Wally Pipp on June 2nd, 1925. Cigarettes and baseball went together, presenting Babe Ruth in the blindfold cigarette test. Old Gold's mildness and smoothness marked it right off the bat as the best. He died of throat cancer. Chesterfield got some of the big stars of the 1947 season to sell Chesterfield cigarettes, including Joe DiMaggio, who didn't pay for that cigarette, Stan Musial, Ted Williams, Ewell Blackwell, who's a pitcher with Cincinnati, Bob Elliott, who is a pretty good player with the Boston Braves, and Bucky Harris, the Yankees manager. Joe Garagiola. I knew Joe. Joe and I had an acquaintanceship, and of course he grew up with Yogi Berra. He knew Yogi Berra from 1927 to 2015. They were best friends from the time they were 2 years old. Joe once said, you know, when Yogi steps in it, he steps in it business-wise. Yogi with Mickey Mantle, Moose Skowron, Elston Howard, trying to sell Yoo-Hoo. And here's what Garagiola meant. Yogi meets the Oliveri family, who has Yoo-Hoo, in 1955 in the New Jersey Country Club. Can't get the brand on the supermarket shelves, so they say, you know what, let's ask Yogi what he thinks. And he tastes the drink, and they're waiting to hear what he thinks. Yogi likes it. Yogi's on board. Not only is he on board, he becomes a member of the Yoo-Hoo family, to the point as Dave Kaplan, and you probably have some of Dave's books in the library, because he ghost wrote them for Yogi, including one I think is called I Never Said Half the Things I Said. Anyway, Dave's telling me a story. He says, one time I was in the office, this is Yogi, and the phone rang. When no one else was around, I always answer a ringing phone, so I did. The woman who was calling asked if Yoo-Hoo was hyphenated. I said, no, ma'am, not even carbonated. Yogi, he sold Kraft Italian dressing. He sold batteries. He sold beer. He sold bicycles. He sold Mapo. And he also sold insurance. Toward the end, Affleck. His teammate, of course, Joe DiMaggio, who didn't pay for that cigarette, the store club, the drink, or anything that night at the store club with Marilyn Monroe. January 14th, 1954, DiMaggio and Monroe eloped in San Francisco. 10 months later, Marilyn files for divorce, citing only mental cruelty. I'm going to leave it at that, although I've heard stories. And apparently it was because of this. Joe was on the set the day that the subway scene was shot for 7 Year Itch, which blew up her skirt. And this is 26-foot Marilyn, who goes around the country where cities have outdoor art. And Stamford, Connecticut 4 years ago. And by the way, somebody had a sense of humor because they put Marilyn with her derriere facing the First Congregational Church. Didn't make churchgoers too happy. So the first thing they saw was the uplifted skirt. And to my left and Marilyn's left, and you're right on the screen, is another church where they saw Marilyn side view. And apparently Joe got really upset that night. I'll leave it at that, although I have heard some stories. Joe was upset for a number of reasons. One was he wanted a stay-at-home wife. That wasn't going to be Marilyn. Two, he wanted a wife to cook for him. That wasn't going to be Marilyn. Three, he wanted a wife who made less money than he did. No, that wasn't going to be him. And four, he wanted somebody less famous than he was. So no, that wasn't going to work. So he took an offer. He didn't get a hit. He was 0 for 4. The couple would divorce. But Joe would carry on in other forms of non-baseball entertainment. The song Mrs. Robinson, which started out as Mrs. Roosevelt on the movie The Graduate. We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. Joe DiMaggio, that was a 1940s song. Duke Ellington did a song called Did You See Jackie, as in Jackie Robinson. Did you see Jackie hit that ball? Teresa Brewer sung a song called Mickey, about Mickey Mantle. But let's talk about Mrs. Robinson. Simon and Garfunkel. You probably have heard this song 20,000 times if you heard it once, the 45. And basically, Paul Simon was hanging around the set, The Graduate, with Mike Nichols. He wrote some incidental music for the movie, and somebody suggested that incidental music be flushed out into a full song. And he did. It was called Mrs. Roosevelt, and Mike Nichols wasn't too happy because, you know, do it about my movie, not about Eleanor Roosevelt, although Paul Simon was looking for heroes at that point. So he changes it to Mrs. Robinson, and there is the line, where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? Nation turns its lonely eyes to you, woo, woo, woo. Joe and Paul, this is according to some of the Yankee people we talked to over the years, go out to dinner. Joe didn't pay for the dinner, of course. And Joe says, what do you mean? Where have I gone? I'm here. I'm eating with you. I did a Bowery commercial. I got Mr. Coffee. Where have you gone? And then Paul Simon tries to go intellectual. Well, you know, I was 10 years old in 1951 when you retired. I never saw you again. I wondered what happened to you. I'm here. I'm with you. And at the end of the night, DiMaggio said, okay. They shook hands, gone. Paul Simon is on the Dick Cavett show. And Dick Cavett also knows that Mickey Mantle hates Joe DiMaggio. DiMaggio, because he sees Mantle, this beautiful blonde-haired guy who's going to be great, and he's on his way out. And Mickey hated him because he thought he loafed on the fly ball in the 1951 World Series. Mickey trips over a drain running fast as he could, tears up his knee, and that's the beginning of his knee problems. Anyway, so they hate each other. So Paul Simon tells Dick Cavett, I said I didn't mean the lines literally. I thought of him as an American hero and that genuine heroes were in short supply. He was talking about Eleanor Roosevelt and Ted Williams. Then he landed on DiMaggio. He accepted the explanation and he thanked me. We shook hands and said good night. Then Cavett says, well, why didn't you use Mickey's name? And the story is Paul Simon told Mickey Mantle is not as good in that situation as Joe DiMaggio. Well, he didn't say that on the Cavett show. He said, it's all about syllables, Dick. It's about how many beats there are. Terry Cashman and I share the same periodontist in Riverdale, New York. I've known Terry for a very long, long time, since the 1980s. He was baseball's balladeer. In the 1980s, he wrote a song called Willie, Mickey, and the Duke, talking baseball. And well, if you look at that picture, it looks like you do need a dentist here because you got to fill in the gap. Duke Snider, Joe DiMaggio has been airbrushed out. Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle. It's a song about 1950s baseball, about Willie, Mickey, and the Duke, who's the best center fielder in New York, where Terry grew up. And Joe is not in there. According to Terry, Joe once asked him about it, and he said it's about players from the 50s. And Joe accepted that because he only played 2 years in the 50s, and he was a shell of himself. Phil Rizzuto is the only Baseball Hall of Famer with a gold record. Jim Steinman just died about 2 weeks ago, who wrote the song Paradise by the Dashboard Light, which was a song about sex. It's about a young guy and a girl in a car, and the guy wants to hit a home run, let's say. And Jim Simon wanted Rizzuto to do the play-by-play of the part in the Paradise by the Dashboard Light record. Meatloaf, who lived near me, told me it took him forever to get where they wanted him to be. They wanted to be Phil Rizzuto. They didn't want him to be an actor. They wanted to be Phil Rizzuto. He provides the play-by-play. The player is an aggressive base runner, gets called out almost a few times, safe at second, safe at third, eventually scores on a suicide squeeze. And he's got this girl for the rest of his life. And at the end of the song, he can't wait for time to end so he could get rid of this girl. Phil claimed he never knew it was about sex until his kids told him it was. His kids were going to school in Boston, college in Boston time. This came out around 1978. I once asked Rizzuto about that, and he says, Huckleberry, he fooled me. Kept the gold record. Baseball cards, baseball cards, baseball cards. Cy Berger invented the modern baseball card with chewing gum in 1951, and there are many periodontists, many dentists and oral surgeons who thank you for that, because it was like biting into a piece of a floor and you kind of ruined your teeth with the sugar and all that other stuff. But baseball cards could teach you how to add, subtract, multiply, or divide if you want to know the back of the baseball card up to date. Entree to gambling. Gambling, you flipped cards, you flipped cards. When I'm live, I usually have people flipping cards. It was your entree to Atlantic City and gambling and football betting and all that other stuff. And you didn't even realize it. Geography, if you want to know where, let's say, Cincinnati was, like on this baseball card, you could go to an atlas and look it up, or a globe and look it up. And they made great bicycle flaps. You took the clothespin, put it into the spokes, put one of these on there, and they were whirling, whirling, whirling sounds. But in 2021, really no new songs, no new literature. Remember Hemingway, Old Man in the Sea, he's got DiMaggio in there, the great DiMaggio in there, which reminds me of another Yogi story. Yogi, Hemingway comes down to the Yankee clubhouse. He's meeting player by player by player. Ernest Hemingway, Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra, Ernest Hemingway. Yogi sticks out his hand, shakes his hand, and he says, "Hey, Ernie, what paper you work for?" Could have said the Kansas City Star. Just another sport these days. Homer Simpson, honored by the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2017. With Casey at the bat, John Fogerty, the singer, once of Creedence, his song Center Field 1985. League of Their Own, the movie, and who's on first. Joe Namath, there I am on the right, Bruce Morton on the left. He occasionally drops in on my talks from ABC. We're talking to Joe Namath, the 20th anniversary of the Jets winning the Super Bowl. He's not trying to sell me any supplemental Medicaid insurance at this point. Joe makes the Super Bowl a national holiday, eclipses the World Series. 1950, baseball, horse racing, boxing dominate American sports. By 1965, football surpassed it. This guy here, Muhammad Ali, bigger than boxing, bigger than anything around the world. Couldn't say boxing. It's on the decline, been on the decline for many years. Of course, horse racing on the decline. Many tracks saved by one-armed bandits now, or slot machines. Jim Bouton wrote the quintessential book on baseball, Ball 4, came out in 1970. Here he is with me. We're at Yogi's Museum. The only time we were together on the same bill speaking. We crisscrossed a lot, but only once we were together in 2007. Ball 4, his book, Humanized Players. We found out Mickey Mantle drank beer, of all things. And Bowie Kuhn, the baseball commissioner, told Bouton to recant the whole book. He made it all up. Bouton said, no, I didn't. It's a great book. It is a great book. It's now over 50 years old. And it was also one of the 20 most influential books of the 20th century, according to the New York Public Library and maybe the library down here. It was also used as part of the arbitration when Peter Seitz ended the reserve clause in the mid-1970s. Soccer has surpassed baseball in a lot of ways, with youth watching it on TV or playing. Here I am in 2015 on the red carpet as I'm in that movie, The Sons of Ben. It's a documentary, and I was in that movie. I thought they were going to boo me. And finally, you know, it ain't over until it's over. You know, nobody goes there because it's too crowded, or tomorrow ain't what it used to be, or the future ain't what it used to be, or it gets late early out there, talking about the shadows over in Yankee Stadium during the World Series, or if you see a fork in the road, take it. Or Carmen, his wife, once asked him, he said, she said, Yogi, where do you want to be buried? Because you were raised in St. Louis, you played for New York Yankees, and you've lived here in New Jersey. Yogi surprised me. Hey, you better go to their funeral, because if you don't go to their funeral, they won't come to yours. It ain't over until it's over. Mike Dyer got Yogi Berra to say that in 1973. Mike Dyer was a writer for the Long Island Press, a guy I knew. He passed away last year. And Mike was telling me the story. New York Mets are, yeah, they're just treading water in 1973. They got a lot of injuries, but they're still in the National League East hunt for the pennant. And they're getting their injured players back, and they're playing good baseball finally, but they still have a row to hoe if they're going to get into the playoffs. And the team doesn't have much, they don't have much room for error. They got to win virtually every game. Team loses. And they're at Chase Stadium, and Yogi's sitting behind his desk, and there's the phalanx of sports writers there, and probably some TV cameras, radio people as well. And Mike asks the question, Yogi, is it over? Ain't over until it's over. It ain't over until it's over, but it's over. I want to thank Rich for inviting me, and I hope you enjoyed our little talk here. And thank you so much for inviting me to the Greenwich Library.
Thank you, Evan. Yeah, I mean, maybe we can try doing something else. Maybe we can try at a different time, maybe like a 7 o'clock or something like that.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out at some point.
It was fascinating. I mean, some of it I was aware of, like the Seinfeld and Bugs Bunny and things like that.
Yeah, well, you know, that's yeah. I mean, look, it's ingrained in the American culture.
Oh yeah,
absolutely ingrained. And your library probably has a lot of what I talked about.
Oh yeah.
You know, the books, you know,
books, movies,
all that other
documentaries,
stuff.
Whatever.
Well, I want to thank you for inviting me. I hope that when people see this on video, that they'll sit and enjoy it.
Well, thank you for doing this, Evan. Appreciate it.